Um, so let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the game. Against Detroit, we both spoke very, very highly of the offensive line. Jimmy Garoppolo played a pretty clean game. And I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo necessarily, I don't know what the sack numbers were against Jimmy Garoppolo this week, but he definitely was a little more uncomfortable in the backfield. It seemed like the defensive line of the Eagles was able to really impose their will on the 49ers offensive line. And I spoke about it all week, telling people, look, this defensive line is underrated. I think this is one of the better defensive lines in the game. We're not going to be coming up against defensive lines this good. However, some of the teams that we do play and some of the teams that are going to be, teams that we need to beat if we want to win a Super Bowl, namely Arizona Cardinals, the Rams, and obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they all have really, really good defensive lines. So seeing the offensive line get tested for the first time and kind of not really be up to par of where they needed to be, are you worried at all about the offensive line?
No, they struggled a little bit yesterday, with everything that was going on. It wasn't their cleanest game. Garoppolo didn't get sacked, but a lot of that had to do with him getting the ball out a couple, and scrambling and making some plays on his own as well. When you're running as many screens and the little short stuff as they were doing yesterday, it's going to help them out, right? And that's one of the biggest things here through the first 2 weeks is the quickness that the ball is coming out. I think has been a big plus for the 49ers compared to where they were last year at this. Garoppolo was under 2.4 or around 2.44 seconds yesterday, 2.51 in week 1. So the ball's coming out quick, and some of that obviously is because of the short game. But even on the throw to Deebo Samuel, if you go back and you watch that play, and you can that ball that's the perfect that throw from Garoppolo to Samuel is the perfect example of why Garoppolo is the starting quarterback over Trey Lance, because that ball comes out so early. That ball, he's still behind. He hasn't even clear. The ball's out and he's still behind the linebacker. So that ball's actually being thrown into the hole while he was on the opposite side of the linebacker. I mean, it's not anything as earth shattering. It's just a quarterback throwing with anticipation, knowing where his guy's supposed to get to and put it in the hole, and then your playmaker make the play. But that's something that Garoppolo does that Lance hasn't shown the ability to do yet.
Now, it seems like this running game once again is, predominantly on the outside, and namely the side that Kittle is going to be on, right? So one of the things that we really envisioned is when Alex Mack was brought in, that we could start having more success down the middle. And that just wasn't the case against the Eagles. You're talking about Jimmy getting the ball out quick, which is obviously great, but we're not seeing the ball necessarily go vertically. It's more horizontally, right? And Jimmy's not the type of quarterback that without time is even going to attempt a ball down the field, a long ball down the field. So when I say, are you worried about the offensive line, if the offensive line is going to be kind of beaten like they were against strong defensive lines here, do you expect that our offense is going to have to compensate, meaning just these short plays, these dink and dunks, these outside, tosses and things like that, because the offensive line just can't give the backfield enough time to set up anything, anything more explosive?
I see where you're going with it, and that could be a concern. And if it's a deal that happens over every week after week, then yeah, that's a concern. I don't see it being something that's going to be hindering them throughout the season. I think it's a week-to-week kind of a deal. Like next week against Green Bay, I don't expect to see the offensive line struggling the way that they struggled this week. So you're not going to have to play that kind of a game. So it just depends on who you're going against. Against the Rams, yeah, you might not be able to get the ball out quite as much because Aaron Donald might be giving you fits in the middle.
Right.
So.
Same with Arizona, right? With Chandler.
Yeah, to an extent, Arizona possibly too. So but again, it goes back to it's kind of a week to week thing when it comes to that, and I do think that the offensive line when you watch that game, they changed over the course of the game. They started the second half, the 49ers imposed their will more with the running game because you saw the 49ers throughout the first half. They kind of stuck with it. In the second half, they definitely were. And they started picking up bigger chunks of yardage on the ground at times in the second half. So they just had to stick with it. That was one of the pieces that I liked about the way that they played. But the offensive line is who they are. And I think Garoppolo was going to help them out a little bit because of his getting the ball out of his hands quick.
Yeah, it was just a little bit disappointing to me just because I thought that the offensive line looked extremely good against Detroit and against the Eagles. And once again, the Eagles are a really good defensive line. I really wanted to see a little more success from them. It really seemed like they were getting pushed around, and there was an Eagle in the backfield. It seemed like every single play, at one point or another.
Yeah, well, Garoppolo was definitely pressured a lot more this week than he was week one. There was definitely a lot more pressure around him. I think there was a couple of them from the two guys on the right side. I think there's like 3 or 4 from the right side and a couple from the left side. And he definitely had more guys in his face. The offensive line wasn't getting that push early on. That was definitely the case with those early runs. Brunskill wasn't getting very much push. He got beat on the first down, but I guess that first play of the game, it looks like the Eagles defensive tackle was offsides based on some of the pictures I've seen. But whatever. That's kind of what you saw was the offensive line just didn't get much of a push early in the game, and that's why they had to start going to the toss.
Right. So something to keep our eye on, though, because I think that eventually we're going to get into some games where we need to just outscore and put up 30 points on the board to be able to get a victory. And if the offensive line is struggling, it's going to be difficult to do that if we're limiting our offense as far as having to throw everything short or horizontal versus being able to, go vertical down the field. So I think that's going to be something to watch, moving forward. If this offensive line could be elite or at least be, top shelf, or if they're going to be a weakness where Shanahan is going to have to change the game plan because the offensive line isn't doing their job.
Yeah, they're gonna look better if the quarterback keeps getting the ball out of his hands quick. They're gonna look better, and if they get the run and in week one they got the run game going, so the run game going slowed down that. There's just, it's like I said, it's kind of a week to week, and you keep hitting on the fact that Philadelphia's got a really good front. They probably have one of the better fronts that the 49ers are going to face this year, really, other than Arizona.
But it also is a big question mark because the teams that we are going to need, we can't only be dominant against teams with bad defensive lines, right, and expect to be considered a top team. So that's what I'm saying. Like, eventually it's gonna like the Eagles, the defense played amazing, lights out, and we're going to talk about them coming up, which kept the score low enough to where 17 points was enough. But if there's an offense like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Arizona Cardinals that has a combination of both very high-powered offenses plus great defensive lines, now what becomes the case if all we could do is the tosses and the screens and the quick slants? Are we going to still be able to contend with these teams? Or are we just going to be outmatched because our offense doesn't have the time to be explosive? That's kind of
I think you're getting into a little bit different of a topic, which is actually one that I would like to talk about that we didn't have set up, which was one of the things that I've heard a lot of in the last almost 30 hours since the game was finished, was the 49ers, how they're going to struggle when they get in, they can, if their offense plays the way that they played in week one and this week in week two, they're going to struggle against the NFC West. They're going to do this. They're going to all this, right? Against the higher power teams. Okay. But you got a defense too. And I think the 49ers defense has been underrated in this whole equation.
Yes.
And I think that you need to look at it from the standpoint of, again, the way that the 49ers won yesterday was because they won as a team. The offense did their part with those long drives. The defense did their part with holding them into the game early until the offense could get themselves under, their feet underneath them. So, the way that I look at it, I know it's 2021. You look back at 2022, the 49ers played these guys really good in the NFC West, and it's week to week, and you can't look at week 2 and think that that's what's going to impact the game in week 4 and week 5, week 10, 12, and 17 down the road, 18,
sure,
and so on.
I mean, I think that this defense obviously is carrying the team at this point. Well, definitely in the last game.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not necessarily saying that when I'm making these statements, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to struggle against these high power teams. What I'm saying is, if they're limited, it's gonna make the game harder than if they're able to show multiple different levels. Like I think against Detroit, they were able to show, throwing the ball down 15 yards, use the middle of the field, things like
Gotcha.
that. Running game was going really well, but against a team where it's high powered, that they're actually scoring the ball is going to be very, very limited. We just saw, last night. I don't know if you watched the Sunday Night Football game. That game was all, a few defensive stops, but really you had to be able to score in that game. Otherwise, you weren't going to win. It was Baltimore's ability to continue to move the chains. The one thing that I can say that the 49ers can sustain long drives, which can, play, and maybe this is what the game is. It's boring, but play the time of possession game, right? Keep the high powered offense off the field, and then just go all the way down, drive, and get a touchdown, taking clock off. That could be part what maybe this team turns into, based off of kind of what we see in these first few weeks.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think I go back to it. This was something that I heard today. You had some really high powered games that went on yesterday. But I think if you took the 49ers defense and you put them up in any of those games aren't quite as high scoring because their defense is going to hold teams down.
Sure.
And the other thing too, it's going to be interesting to watch when we talk about let's get into the defense in a second, because there's some issues I think over there, not that are bad, but which are going to impact the scores of games as well.
Yeah. Harold Murillo says, I'm hopeful that the offensive line will improve each game. The offensive line is building chemistry. This is the first time that Alex Mack is with the line. They will improve. Absolutely great point, Harold. We do want to see progress week after week. And yeah, this is a brand new offensive line, not just bringing in Alex Mack, but also Brunskill now being the full-time right guard. I think is a change that the team needs to get used to. But